The carburetor on the 72 Triumph was giving me hell, and I was three knuckles deep in grease when my son told me I was ruining his life. "You're holding me back professionally, Dad." I didn't look up from the engine. 26 years of fatherhood had taught me that silence sometimes said more than any comeback I could manufacture. The smell of oil and metal shavings filled my garage workshop, mixing with the late afternoon heat that made everything shimmer like a mirage. Outside, the neighborhood was doing its usual Thursday routine: lawn mowers, kids on bikes, someone's dog barking at nothing. Dylan stood in the doorway, backlit by the sun, wearing one of those expensive button-downs that cost more than my first motorcycle. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him screamed corporate ladder, and I suppose that was the point. "Are you even listening to me?" I set down my wrench and wiped my hands on a shop rag that had seen better days. "I heard you. And I'm wondering what the hell you're talking about." He stepped into the garage, and I noticed he was careful not to let his clothes touch anything. My workshop had always made him nervous, like the grease might jump off the workbench and attack his professional image. I'd built this place from nothing, started with a single bay and a dream of restoring vintage motorcycles. 20 years later, it was mine. Every tool, every machine, every inch of concrete floor. "I'm trying to build something here," Dylan said. "A real career. But everywhere I go, people know me as Dean's son, the motorcycle guy's kid. That's a problem. It's limiting. I need to establish my own identity, my own brand." Brand. The word tasted wrong in a space that smelled like honest work. "What exactly do you want me to do about it?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his mother. Allison did the same thing when she was trying to find the right words for something difficult. "Maybe you could be less visible, less involved in my professional circles." "I'm not in your professional circles, Dylan. I fix motorcycles. You push paper around a desk. Our worlds don't exactly overlap." "They do when people Google my name and find articles about your shop. When clients ask if I'm related to that Dean who restored the mayor's Harley. It's embarrassing." Something cold settled in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "Embarrassing. You know what I mean." "I really don't." He sighed, the sound of a patient man dealing with someone who just didn't get it. "I'm trying to move up in the world, Dad. I need people to take me seriously as my own person, not as some blue-collar guy's kid who got lucky." The Triumph's engine suddenly didn't seem important anymore. I stood up, all 6 feet of me, and looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become this person? This stranger who thought 20 years of sweat and skill were something to be ashamed of? "Get out of my garage." "Dad, out, now." He left, but not before giving me that look. The one that said I was proving his point, being too emotional, too rough around the edges for his sanitized world. I didn't touch the motorcycle again that day. Instead, I sat on my rolling stool and stared at the walls covered in photos. Me with customers, me with bikes I'd restored, me with my hands dirty and my smile genuine. Embarrassing. The word kept echoing. Allison found me there an hour later. She'd been at her book club and she smelled like coffee and the vanilla perfume she'd worn since we were 23. She took one look at my face and knew. "Dylan?" "Yeah." She pulled up another stool, settling beside me with the comfortable silence of 31 years of marriage. We'd met when I was still figuring out the difference between a carburetor and a camshaft, when she was studying to be a teacher, and we were both too young to know how hard life could get. What did he say this time? That I'm holding him back. That I need to be less visible because it embarrasses him. Her hand found mine. "He's young, ambitious. Sometimes that makes people say stupid things." "He's 26, Allison. Not a kid anymore." "No," she agreed. "Not a kid." We sat there as the light changed outside, painting long shadows across the concrete. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Dylan's car start up and drive away. probably heading back to his apartment downtown, the one with the view and the rent that made my mortgage look like pocket change. "I heard something," Allison said finally. "At book club." I waited. Brooke was there, Dylan's wife. I know who Brooke is. She was talking to some of the other women about how Dylan is the real brains behind your business success. What? She said you'd been lucky, but that Dylan understood the business side of things better. That he'd been advising you for years, and that's why the shop has done well. The cold thing in my chest spread to my arms, my legs. I built that shop before Dylan could drive. I know. He's never advised me on anything except maybe which fancy coffee maker to buy. I know that too. But apparently other people didn't, and that was a problem. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Allison breathe and thinking about all the ways a person could betray someone without using a knife. Words were weapons too. Reputation was currency. And somehow, somewhere along the way, my son had decided that mine was worth stealing. At 3 a.m, I got up and went to my home office. Really just a converted bedroom with a desk and a filing cabinet. I started pulling out papers, business licenses, tax returns, permits, all in my name, all dated years before Dylan had even graduated high school. Something was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a storm coming before the first drop of rain falls. I was still looking through files when my phone rang at 8:30 the next morning. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Dean?" "Speaking." "This is Reed Foster. I'm the hiring manager at Techstride Solutions. I understand you provided a reference for Dylan?" My brain stuttered. "I'm sorry, what?" "A reference. For the senior position Dylan applied for here, he listed you as his primary professional reference." I hadn't written any reference, hadn't even known Dylan was job hunting. "Mr. Foster, I think there's been some kind of mistake. Could you hold on a moment?" There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "I have the reference letter right here. It's on your company letterhead. Signed by you. Can you read me the first few lines?" He cleared his throat. "To whom it may concern, I am pleased to provide this reference for my son Dylan, who has been instrumental in the strategic development and growth of my motorcycle restoration business. Dylan's insight into modern business practices, digital marketing, and operational efficiency has transformed our company from a small local shop into a recognized regional brand. His contributions have directly resulted in a 300% increase in revenue over the past 5 years, and I credit much of our success to his guidance and vision." The room tilted slightly. None of that was true. Not one word. "Mr. Foster, I never wrote that letter." Silence on the other end. "Then, are you saying this is fraudulent?" "I'm saying I never wrote it, I never signed it, and most of what it claims is false." More silence. I could hear him breathing, thinking, processing. "Mr. Dean, would you like to come in? I think we need to have a longer conversation." "Yeah," I said. "I think we do." I hung up and sat there, staring at my phone like it might suddenly make sense of everything. But it didn't. Nothing did. Allison appeared in the doorway, still in her bathrobe, her hair uncombed. Who was that? Someone who just explained what holding me back professionally really meant. She came into the room, sat across from me. "Tell me." So I did. Every word. And as I talked, I watched her face change from confusion to understanding to something harder. Something that looked like the woman I'd married before life had smoothed her edges. "He forged your signature." "Looks that way." "He claimed credit for your work." "Yeah." "Dean, what are you going to do?" I looked at her. This woman who'd stood by me through failed loans and broken motorcycles and all the years when success was just a theory. "I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes." She nodded. "Good." The meeting was scheduled for 2 that afternoon. I had time to do some digging. I started with the basics. Dylan's social media, his LinkedIn profile. What I found made my hands shake. His job title: Business Development Consultant, Freelance. His description: specializing in small business modernization and strategic growth. Case study: helped transform family motorcycle restoration business into regional brand leader, achieving 300% revenue growth through digital strategy implementation. He'd stolen my biography and rewritten it as his achievement. I kept digging, found his resume posted on some job board. Under professional experience, he'd listed himself as strategic advisor and operations partner at my shop. Dates going back 5 years. Responsibilities that made it sound like he'd been running the place while I hammered metal in the background. My phone buzzed. Text from Dylan. "Hey Dad, can we talk? I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." I didn't respond. Instead, I called my accountant, Harold. We'd known each other since my first tax season as a business owner, when I'd walked into his office with a shoebox full of receipts and no idea what I was doing. He'd laughed at me then, but he'd help me anyway. "Dean, what's up?" "Harold, I need you to check something for me. Has anyone been making inquiries about my business? Credit checks, financial reviews, anything like that? Give me a minute." I heard keyboard clicking. "Actually, yeah. Got a request last week from a business line of credit application. Came through with your EIN. Did I apply for a business line of credit? You're calling me to ask, so I'm guessing no. Who submitted it?" More clicking. "Name on the application is Dylan. Says he's authorized on the account." He wasn't. Had never been. "Harold, I need copies of everything. And I need to know what else has been happening that I don't know about." "Dean, are you in some kind of trouble?" "Not me," I said, "but somebody is." When I hung up, I realized Allison was standing in the doorway again, watching me with that expression that meant she was 3 steps ahead of wherever my brain was. "This is bigger than a job reference, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." "How much bigger?" I pulled up Dylan's LinkedIn profile again, showed her the phone. She read it in silence, her mouth getting tighter with each line. "He's claiming he built your business, while I was just the mechanic who got lucky. Dean, this could destroy your reputation, your client relationships, everything you've worked for." "I know." She set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. "So what are we going to do about it?" That was Allison. Not, "What are you going to do?" but "What are we?" 31 years, and she was still in my corner. "I'm going to this meeting. I'm going to find out exactly what Dylan told these people. And then I'm going to figure out how to fix this before it gets worse." "Do you think it can get worse?" I thought about the credit application, the forged reference, the stolen narrative of my life's work. "Yeah, I think it can get a lot worse." I got dressed for the meeting, not in my work clothes, but in the suit I kept for funerals and court dates. It was 10 years old and didn't fit quite right anymore, but it was clean, and it made me look like someone who should be taken seriously. Allison helped me with the tie. Her hands were steady, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Be careful," she said. "I'm just going to talk to them. I mean with Dylan. Whatever he's done, he's still our son. Our son just tried to steal my business out from under me. I know, but he's still our son." I kissed her forehead. "I'll remember that." The drive downtown took 20 minutes through lunch traffic. TechStride Solutions had offices in one of those glass buildings that looked like it cost more per square foot than my house was worth. I parked in the visitor lot and walked through doors that opened automatically into a lobby that echoed with the clicking of expensive shoes on marble floors. The receptionist was young, professional, and looked at my older suit like she was trying to place which decade it came from. "Can I help you?" "Dean, I have a meeting with Reed Foster." She made a call, then gestured to a waiting area. "He'll be right down." I sat on furniture that was more art than comfort and watched people move through the lobby, young mostly. Everyone in business casual, carrying tablets and talking about synergy and disruption and all the other words that sounded like they meant something but didn't. Dylan wanted to be one of these people, wanted it so badly he was willing to lie, cheat, and forge his way there. Dean? I stood. Reed Foster was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with glasses and the kind of handshake that had been practiced to convey confidence. Thanks for coming in. This is Melissa from HR. The woman next to him nodded. She was carrying a folder thick enough to be concerning. They led me to a conference room with a view of the city and enough chairs for a meeting that wasn't happening. Just the three of us. The walls were glass, which meant anyone walking by could see in. I noticed a few curious glances. Reed sat across from me, Melissa beside him. The folder went on the table between us. I want to be direct, Mr. Dean. What you told me this morning raises serious concerns about Dylan's application. I appreciate the directness. Can you tell us in your own words what your relationship with Dylan is, both personal and professional? He's my son. He's never worked for my business except for a summer job in high school where he mostly swept floors and complained about the heat. Melissa made a note. Reed opened the folder. That contradicts everything he told us in his interviews and in his application materials. He presented himself as essentially a partner in your business, someone who'd been instrumental in its growth and development. He wasn't. Reed pulled out several sheets of paper. This is the reference letter we received. This is his resume, and these are notes from his interviews where he discussed at length his role in transforming your business. He slid them across the table. I picked up the reference letter first. It was on my business letterhead. Somehow he'd gotten access to that. The signature looked like mine if you didn't look too close. But the words, the tone, the claims, none of it was me. The resume was worse. It painted a picture of Dylan as a strategic consultant who'd been embedded in my business for 5 years, driving every major decision, modernizing operations, expanding client base. There was enough truth sprinkled in to make the lies more believable. Yes, we'd grown. Yes, we'd updated our computer systems. Yes, revenue was up. But attributing it all to Dylan? That was fiction. Mr. Dean, I have to ask, is it possible Dylan contributed more than you realized? Sometimes people in operational roles don't see the strategic work happening behind the scenes. I looked at Reed, this young man who'd probably never worked with his hands in his life, and tried to keep my voice level. I designed every workflow in that shop. I negotiated every supplier contract. I built the relationships with every client. I hired every employee. I made every strategic decision about what services to offer, what markets to enter, what bikes to specialize in. Dylan has been to my shop maybe 10 times in the last 5 years, and most of those were for family dinners where he complained about the smell. Melissa stopped writing. Reed adjusted his glasses. Then why would he claim otherwise? Because he wants what I built, but he doesn't want to admit it's mine. He wants to be seen as a business success, but he hasn't actually built anything. So he decided to rewrite history and cast himself as the hero of someone else's story. Reed and Melissa exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. There's more, Melissa said. She pulled out another document. Dylan's application also included this, a letter claiming he has partial ownership of your business. It suggests that he's in the process of taking over full management, with you transitioning to retirement. The paper in my hand felt like it was burning. None of it was true, but it was detailed, official-looking, convincing. He doesn't own any part of my business. I'm not retiring, and I have no idea where he got the audacity to claim any of this. Do you have documentation to support that? Melissa asked. Not accusatory, just professional. Business licenses, articles of incorporation, anything that establishes clear ownership. In my car. I pulled all of it this morning when I started realizing something was wrong. Would you be willing to let us see it? I went to my car and came back with the folder I'd assembled. Tax returns showing me as sole proprietor, business licenses with my name only, bank account documentation, insurance policies, every piece of paper that proved the shop was mine and always had been. They reviewed it all in silence. I watched their faces, saw the understanding dawn. "Mr. Dean," Reed said finally, "I think Dylan has committed several forms of fraud here. Forging your signature, misrepresenting his role and ownership, falsifying his professional experience. What happens now? We're going to withdraw his application and flag his name in our system. But I'd strongly recommend you speak with a lawyer. If he's doing this here, he might be doing it elsewhere. And possibly with other aspects of your business that you haven't discovered yet," Melissa added. She pulled out a business card, slid it across to me. "My brother is a business attorney. He specializes in internal fraud and family business disputes. You might want to give him a call." I pocketed the card and gathered my papers. "Can I ask you something? In his interviews, did Dylan ever express any doubt about what he was claiming? Any hesitation?" Reed shook his head. "No. He was confident, articulate, and completely convincing. If you hadn't called, we would have hired him. He was going to start next Monday." I left the building feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The afternoon sun was too bright, the air too thin. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. Dylan had looked those people in the eye and lied with complete confidence, had forged my signature, had tried to steal credit for 20 years of my work, and he'd almost gotten away with it. My phone buzzed. Another text from Dylan. "Dad, seriously, we need to talk. This is important." I stared at the message, then turned off my phone entirely. The drive home was a blur. I kept seeing Dylan's LinkedIn profile in my mind, those carefully crafted lies presented as truth. Kept thinking about all the people who might have seen it, believed it, made decisions based on it. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Allison waiting on the porch. She'd changed out of her bathrobe into jeans and one of my old shop shirts. War attire. "How bad?" she asked as I climbed the steps. "Career-ending fraud bad. Multiple felonies bad." We went inside. I told her everything. The forged letter, the fake ownership claim, the stolen professional narrative. She listened without interrupting, her face getting harder with each detail. When I finished, she said, "We need to know what else he's done. If he forged one signature, he might have forged others. Already thought of that. I'm calling Quinn tomorrow." Quinn was our lawyer. Had handled our wills, our business formation, every legal thing we'd ever needed. If anyone could help me figure out how deep this went, it was him. "What about Dylan?" Allison asked. "Are you going to confront him?" "Not yet. First, I need to know everything. Then I decide how to handle it." She nodded. We were thinking the same thing. That confronting Dylan before we had the full picture might just push him to hide evidence or create more lies. "He's been calling you," she said. "I know. I'm not answering." "He might show up here." "Then we don't let him in until we're ready." Allison reached across the table, took my hand. Hers was shaking slightly. "Dean, this is our son, our boy. How did it come to this?" I didn't have an answer. I'd watched Dylan grow up, taught him to ride a bike, sat through his school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Somewhere along the way, the kid who'd been proud to tell people his dad fixed motorcycles had turned into a man who thought that same fact was embarrassing enough to lie about. "I don't know," I said. "But we're going to find out. And then we're going to fix it." That night, we ordered takeout and ate it at the kitchen table in silence. Neither of us had much appetite. Allison kept checking her phone, probably waiting for Dylan to call her. I kept mine off. Around 9, someone knocked on the door. We both froze. Allison looked at me. "Dylan?" "Probably." The knocking came again, more insistent. Then Dylan's voice. "Dad? Mom? I know you're in there." We didn't move. After a minute, we heard his footsteps retreating, his car starting, driving away. "This is going to get ugly," Allison said. "It already is." The next week crawled by. I waited for Donna to tell me about the gathering, but she didn't call, didn't text, didn't stop by. Then on Friday morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Donna's handwriting. "You need to hear this. I'm sorry." I took the drive inside, plugged it into my laptop. There were 3 audio files. I clicked on the first one. Brooke's voice came through my speakers, clear and confident. "The truth is, Dean has never appreciated Dylan. He's always seen him as a threat. And when Dylan started having success on his own, Dean couldn't handle it." Other women's voices murmured agreement. "Dylan has been trying to help his father's business for years, bringing in modern strategies, new clients, better processes, but Dean is too proud and too stubborn to admit he needed help. So when Dylan started getting recognition for his contributions, Dean snapped." "What do you mean, snapped?" someone asked. "He started accusing Dylan of stealing, of lying, of fraud, made up this whole story about forged documents and fake companies. It's delusional, honestly. But Dean got a lawyer who helped him create fake evidence, and they used it to get a restraining order. That's terrible. It is. And the worst part is that Dylan just wants to help. He loves his father. But Dean has pushed him away so completely that now Dylan is facing legal problems for crimes he didn't commit." The recording went on. Brooke painting Dylan as a devoted son and me as a mentally unstable tyrant. She was convincing. I could hear it in the responses from the other women. Sympathy, outrage, support for poor Dylan and his manipulative wife, who were just trying to help. It was masterful manipulation, a complete inversion of reality, delivered with just enough emotion to make it believable. The second file was more of the same. Brooke showing people evidence, which turned out to be emails I'd sent Dylan over the years, taken out of context to make me sound controlling and dismissive. A text message where I'd told him he didn't understand the motorcycle business, presented as proof of my contempt for his intelligence. The third file was the worst. Brooke lowering her voice, getting confidential. "Between us, I think Dean might be developing early dementia. Allison won't admit it, but some of his behaviors lately, the paranoia, the false accusations, the inability to recognize Dylan's contributions, they all point to cognitive decline. It's sad, really. But it also means we need to protect the family business before Dean makes decisions that destroy it." Several women gasped. Someone said, "Oh my God, that's awful." I know, and Allison is in denial, so she's not getting him help. That's why Dylan has been trying to establish himself separately, so that when Dean eventually has to step down, the business doesn't collapse. I sat there, listening to my son's wife diagnose me with dementia and position herself as the concerned family member trying to save everyone from my deterioration. It was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. Because dementia explained everything. Why I'd falsely accused Dylan. Why I couldn't remember his contributions. Why I was being irrational about the evidence. If people believed this story, I wasn't just a victim of theft. I was a sick old man who couldn't be trusted. I called Quinn immediately. "She's claiming you have dementia?" On recording, to at least a dozen people at this gathering. That's defamation. Clear, actionable defamation. Can we use it? Absolutely. Forward me the files. I'm going to add this to the evidence pile. And Dean, this might actually help us. How? Because she's escalating. She's so desperate to control the narrative that she's making claims that are provably false. You can get a cognitive evaluation from a doctor, prove you're completely competent, then her lies become undeniable. It strengthens your case against both of them. So I have to go prove I'm not losing my mind? Unfortunately, yes. But it's a small price to pay for destroying her credibility. I made an appointment with a neurologist for the following week. Spent 2 hours doing cognitive tests, memory, reasoning, problem solving. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense manner, reviewed the results. "Mr. Dean, you're absolutely fine. Your cognitive function is completely normal for your age. Actually, you scored above average in several areas. Can you put that in writing? For legal purposes? Yes. Of course. Can I ask what this is about? My son's wife is telling people I have dementia to explain why I accused him of stealing from me. Her expression hardened. That's a serious allegation to make falsely. Yes, I'll absolutely document that your cognitive function is normal, and if you need me to testify to that, I will. Quinn filed an amended complaint, adding defamation to the list of civil actions against Dylan and Brooke. We included the recordings, the neurologist's report, and testimony from clients who'd been contacted by Brooke with stories about my supposed mental decline. Dylan's lawyer fought back hard, claimed the recordings were obtained illegally, that the defamation was just Brooke expressing personal opinions, that we were engaging in a harassment campaign. But the evidence kept stacking up. More clients came forward with stories of being contacted by Dylan or Brooke, trying to undermine confidence in my ability to run the business. More financial records showed money being systematically diverted. More documents surfaced with forged signatures. The DA decided to prosecute. Dylan was formally charged with fraud, theft, and identity theft. Brooke wasn't charged criminally, but the civil defamation case against her was solid. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out. 6 months of waiting, wondering, watching my family implode in slow motion. But something else was happening too. Something I hadn't expected. People were starting to see through the lies. Clients who'd heard Brooke's stories started hearing my side and realizing which version made more sense. Neighbors who'd been sympathetic to Dylan started asking questions about why his story kept changing, and slowly, painfully, my reputation started to rebuild. Business picked back up. Not to where it had been, but enough that I could breathe again. I hired an additional mechanic to handle the backlog, started taking on bigger restoration projects again. Allison and I found a new rhythm, harder than before, sadder, but honest. We talked about what we'd lost, what we'd learned, what we wanted the rest of our lives to look like. "Do you think he'll go to prison?" she asked one night. "I don't know. Quinn thinks the evidence is strong enough that he'll probably take a plea deal." "Do you want him to go to prison?" "I want him to face consequences for what he did. I want him to understand that actions have costs. Whether that means prison or something else, I don't know." "Do you think we'll ever have a relationship with him again?" That was the question that kept me up at night. Not the relationship we had, that's gone, but maybe eventually something else, something real. But only if he's willing to be honest, to admit what he did and why. And if he never does, then I guess we learn to live with a sun-shaped hole in our lives. She cried a little then. Not the sobbing grief of those early days, but the quiet sadness of accepting something terrible and true. The preliminary hearings were brutal. Watching Dylan sit at the defendant's table, listening to prosecutors detail his crimes, seeing him try to maintain his innocent expression while evidence contradicted every word he'd said, it was like watching a stranger wearing my son's face. Brooke sat behind him every day, playing the supportive wife. But her mask was cracking too. I could see the strain in her face, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. Quinn had been right. The recordings from her gathering were devastating to her credibility. When played in court, her voice confidently asserting my dementia while my cognitive evaluation showed perfect function, the judge's expression made it clear what he thought of her truthfulness. Dylan's lawyer tried to suppress the recordings, claiming they violated privacy laws. But Donna testified that the gathering was semi-public, that Brooke had encouraged people to spread the information, that there was no reasonable expectation of privacy for statements made to a dozen people with the explicit purpose of shaping public opinion. The motion to suppress was denied. As the trial date approached, Quinn started getting calls from Dylan's lawyer, feeling out potential plea deals. Would we consider dropping the civil suits if Dylan pled guilty to reduced charges? Would we accept restitution instead of prison time? What do you want to do? Quinn asked. I thought about it, really thought about it, about justice and revenge and healing and whether any of this would make me feel whole again. I want the truth on record. I want an official acknowledgement that he committed fraud and theft. Beyond that, I'll consider restitution. But he has to allocate, explain exactly what he did, why he did it, how long it went on. And the civil suits? Brooke needs to face consequences for her defamation. That doesn't go away. Quinn nodded. I'll communicate that to them. 3 days later, Dylan took a plea deal, pled guilty to 1 count of felony fraud and 1 count of felony theft, agreed to full restitution of $87,432, the final tally of what he'd stolen. 5 years probation, no prison time if he complied with all terms. Part of the deal was an allocation hearing where he had to explain his crimes under oath. I sat in that courtroom and listened to my son describe how he'd created fake vendor accounts, intercepted client payments, and forged my signature on documents. How he'd done it to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford on his salary. How he'd justified it by telling himself he deserved the money, that he was contributing to the family business in ways that weren't officially recognized. He never once said he was sorry, never looked at me. Just recited the facts in a flat monotone, fulfilling the legal requirement while giving away nothing of himself. When it was over, the judge accepted the plea and imposed sentence. Dylan walked out of the courtroom a convicted felon with a restitution order he'd be paying off for years. Brooke's civil trial was scheduled for a month later, but the day before trial, her lawyer called Quinn. She wants to settle. On what terms? She'll issue a public retraction of all statements about Dean's mental health. She'll pay nominal damages and legal costs. She'll agree not to contact Dean or his business ever again. Is that enough for your client? Quinn asked me. I thought about it. About revenge and vindication, and whether making Brooke suffer more would actually make anything better. Yes, I want the public retraction. I want it clear that she lied. Beyond that, I just want her out of my life. The settlement was finalized. Brooke issued a statement admitting she had made false claims about my mental health, that she had no basis for those claims, and that she apologized for any harm caused. It was posted on her social media accounts, on the neighborhood message board, sent as letters to everyone she'd spoken to at that gathering. She hated every word of it. I could tell from the stiff, legalistic language, but she'd signed it. The next few months were strange. Business continued to recover. I hired another mechanic, then an apprentice, started teaching someone young the craft I'd spent my life perfecting. It felt good to pass on knowledge, to watch someone else's eyes light up when they figured out a difficult repair. Emily came by regularly. Sunday dinners, random weekday visits. Slowly, tentatively, we rebuilt a relationship. It wasn't the same as before. Too much had happened. Too many illusions had been shattered. But it was real, and that counted for something. We didn't talk about Dylan much. It hurt too much, and none of us had answers anyway. Then one day, about 4 months after the plea deal, I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting on the envelope. Dylan's. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unread. Part of me needed to know what he had to say. Finally, I opened it. Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to respond to this. But I need to say some things, and writing them down is the only way I can get them out. I've been going to therapy, court-mandated at first, but I've kept going even though I don't have to anymore. It's been hard, facing what I did, understanding why I did it. The therapist keeps asking me about pride, about ego, about needing to be seen as successful, even though I hadn't actually achieved anything worth being proud of. She's right. That's what it was. I was so desperate to be seen as someone important, someone successful, that I stole your accomplishments and wore them like they were mine. I told myself I deserved credit because I'd given you advice, because I'd supported you, because I was your son and your success reflected on me. But that was all bullshit. I didn't build anything. I didn't earn anything. I just took what you made and claimed it as mine because I was too insecure to build something myself. But I also thought about the letters, the visit to the shop, the consistent updates showing real change. And I thought about the fact that if Dylan was serious about this, it might be the first honest thing he'd asked for in years. Let me think about it. That's fair. Thank you for considering it. I talked to Allison, to Quinn, to Harold, to Emily. Everyone had opinions. Most thought I was crazy to even consider it. A few thought maybe it was worth trying. In the end, I made my decision based on a simple question. Could I live with myself if Dylan really was trying to change and I refused to give him a chance? The answer was no. So I called him back. 3-month trial, weekends only. You work under my direct supervision. You don't talk to clients about anything beyond the specific work you're doing. You don't access any business records or financial information. You don't get keys or alarm codes. You show up on time, you do exactly what you're told, and at the end of 3 months, we evaluate whether this is working. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Dad. Don't thank me yet. This might be the hardest work you've ever done. I hope it is. He started the following Saturday, showed up in old jeans and a t-shirt ready to work. I started him on the absolute basics, cleaning tools, organizing parts, sweeping floors, the kind of work he'd complained about when he was 16. He didn't complain now, just did what he was told, quietly and thoroughly. I watched him carefully, looking for signs that this was performance. But if it was, he was committed to the bit. He asked questions about technique, not about business. He focused on learning skills, not on gaining access. He was humble about what he didn't know, which was almost everything. After a month, I started letting him assist with actual repairs, teaching him the basics of engine work, showing him the right way to handle tools, explaining the logic behind diagnostic processes. He was slow, made mistakes, but he listened, corrected himself, improved. It reminded me of teaching other apprentices over the years, the same learning curve, the same frustrations and small victories. The second month, I let him work more independently on simpler tasks, basic maintenance, minor repairs, grunt work that freed up my time for complex restorations. He showed up every weekend, never late, never making excuses, just quietly putting in the hours. We didn't talk about the past, didn't discuss the trial or the theft or the betrayal, just focused on the work in front of us. At the end of the 3rd month, I called him into my office. So, I said, 3 months is up. Yes. You've been consistent, reliable, you've learned a lot, you've done good work. Thank you. Why are you really doing this, Dylan? He thought about it for a moment. Because I want to understand what it takes to build something real. Because I want to earn respect through work instead of manipulating it through lies. And because I want a relationship with you based on truth instead of the fake version I tried to create. What if we never get that relationship back? Then at least I'll have the skills and the self-respect that comes from learning something honestly. That's still worth it. I looked at him. This son who'd betrayed me, who'd spent 2 years proving he might be different, who was sitting in front of me asking for nothing but the chance to keep learning. Okay, you can keep working weekends, same terms, no special treatment. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep showing up and doing the work. So he did. Week after week, month after month. Learning the trade, building skills, earning his place through sweat and patience. We started talking more. Not about the past, but about the present. About techniques and tools and the satisfaction of fixing something broken. Small conversations, surface level, but real. After 6 months, I started paying him slightly more than minimum wage. He'd earned it. After a year, I let him take on more complex repairs under supervision. We still weren't father and son, Not the way we'd been. But we were something. Mentor and apprentice. Allison started coming to the shop sometimes when Dylan was working, watching us, looking for signs that this was real. I think she was afraid to believe it, afraid of being hurt again. But gradually, cautiously, she started to believe too. Emily brought Troy by one weekend. They hung around the shop, watching Dylan work. Afterward, Emily pulled me aside. "He's different," she said. "Yeah. Do you trust him now?" "No, but I'm starting to believe he might become someone I could trust someday." That's progress. It's something. 2 years after Dylan started working weekends at my shop, he did something that surprised me. He finished a complex transmission repair on a vintage Triumph, working independently while I supervised another project. When I came over to inspect his work, it was perfect. Every part aligned correctly, every specification met, the kind of quality work that comes from real skill and careful attention. "Good job," I said. He looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine pride in his eyes. Not the fake pride of stolen achievements, but the real thing. The satisfaction of work done well. "Thanks, Dad." We worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then I said, "You know what the difference is between now and before?" "What?" "Before, you wanted people to think you were successful. Now you're actually doing the work to become skilled. That's real. The other thing was just empty." "I know. Took me too long to figure that out. Most people never figure it out at all." We went back to work. Just two guys fixing motorcycles, with all the complicated history between us existing in the background, but not defining every moment. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when I looked at him and remembered everything he'd done. Still moments when I caught myself watching for signs of manipulation. Still a fundamental uncertainty about whether this change was permanent or just another long con. But it was real. As real as anything could be after what we'd been through. That night I told Allison, "I think maybe someday we'll actually have a relationship with Dylan again. A different one, smaller, more careful, but something. Do you want that?" "I don't know. But I think I'm becoming open to the possibility." That's more than I thought would be possible 2 years ago. Yeah, me too. We sat on the porch watching the neighborhood settle into evening. The same street where we'd raised our kids, where Dylan had grown up, where everything had fallen apart and somehow, slowly, started to rebuild. "Do you ever wonder if we failed him somehow?" Allison asked. "If there was something we could have done differently?" "Sometimes. But I think Dylan made his own choices. We can't take responsibility for those. All we can do is decide how to respond when people show us who they really are." And who is Dylan really? I don't know yet, but I'm starting to think maybe he doesn't know either. Maybe he's still figuring it out, and maybe that's okay. The sun set. Lights came on in houses up and down the street. Somewhere in the distance, someone was cooking dinner. Life, continuing in its messy, complicated way. We went inside. Tomorrow I'd go back to the shop, back to the work, back to the slow process of teaching Dylan a trade he should have learned years ago instead of trying to steal credit for mine. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined. It wasn't justice in the clean, satisfying way stories usually deliver it. It was just life, messy, uncertain, full of small steps forward and occasional steps back. But it was real, and after everything we'd been through, real was enough.